Darth Malidi vs. Luminara by Brian Shinomiya. Rzeszow was a harsh, unforgiving world, a desert planet on the edge of the known galaxy. Recent whispers of civil war within the one Sith faction, ignited by the assassination of their emperor, had reached the ears of the Galactic Republic. The mission was simple: discover who and what the one Sith were, and gog the threat they posed. Jedi Master Luminara Unduli and her newly graduated apprentice Barriss Offee were dispatched to investigate. Their ship, a VCX-100 light freighter, cruised through hyperspace, the stars streaking past the viewpoint as they approached their destination. The decision to use a civilian ship was deliberate. The Republic didn't want to draw undue attention to their operatives. As they exceeded hyperspace, the barren, sun-scorched landscape of Rzeszow came into view.
"We're entering the atmosphere now,"
Luminara said, her hands steady on the controls. The ship shuddered slightly as it penetrated the planet's outer layer. Barriss sat beside her, eyes wide with anticipation. "It's hard to believe anything could survive out here," she murmured.
"The climate alone would deter most settlers."
Luminara nodded.
Yet, the whispers of the one Sith's presence suggest otherwise. We must be prepared for anything."
The freighter descended smoothly, landing in a remote area just outside the abandoned town. The ramp lowered, and the two Jedi stepped out, immediately feeling the intense heat. The sun blazed down from a cloudless sky, making the metal of the ship almost too hot to touch. They adjusted their robes and began to trek towards the town, each step kicking up dust from the dry ground. The two Jedi moved cautiously through the desolated town. Once bustling, it now held only a few dozen citizens clinging to life amidst the ruins. The streets were eerily quiet, the only sounds being the whisper of the wind and the distant creak of abandoned buildings. Here, credits and chips were worthless. The only currency that mattered was water and rations. "This place feels like a graveyard," Barriss remarked, her eyes scanning the crumbling facades. "Do you think the one Sith presence is strong here?" Luminara nodded thoughtfully, her senses on high alert.
"The assassination of their emperor likely created a power vacuum. Such instability attracts opportunists. We must stay vigilant. Desperation can drive people to do dangerous things."
They walked in silence for a while, the oppressive heat pressing down on them. As they rounded a corner, they encountered an old man lying atop some rusted crates in the shade, his skin dry and cracked from the relentless sun. Lumina approached him with respect.
"Excuse me, sir. Can you tell us about that skyscraper?"
she asked, nodding towards the towering structure in the distance. The old man glanced at her briefly, his eyes wary and distant. He then ignored her, turning his gaze back to the ground. Undeterred, Luminara took out some rations and waited. The man's eyes flickered towards the food, and he held out his hand without making eye contact. She handed him a canteen, and after a long swig, he finally spoke.
"That tower, it's cursed,"
he rasped, his voice rough and tired.
"Haunted by the spirits of those who ventured inside. People move in and out of there at night, shadows creeping through the ruins. You're not the first to investigate it, but only one ever returned, and he lost his mind."
Barriss shivered slightly at the man's words.
"What else can you tell us?"
She pressed gently. The old man sighed deeply, his breath rattling in his chest.
"It used to be a hub, a place where trade and life flourished. But now, it's just a tomb. They say the one Sith have taken over, using it as their stronghold. Anyone who goes in there never comes out the same. The last one who did was babbling about ghosts, about a darkness that consumes everything. Oh, the building itself seems to pulse with malevolent energy. The walls, they whisper. It's a place of nightmares.
Thank you.
Luminara said, her tone solemn. The man muttered something unintelligible as they walked away, his voice trailing off into the desolate air. They reached the top of a dune, and the skyscraper loomed ominously before them. The structure, made of dark, weathered stone, stood defiantly against the relentless sun. Its windows, many shattered or boarded up, reflected the harsh light, casting eerie glint across the sands. The building seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy, a sinister presence that sent a chill down Barry's spine. Barriss broke the tense silence. "Won't we need these rations?" she asked, glancing at the supplies they carried. Luminara gazed at the imposing structure, her expression unreadable.
Don't worry,
She replied, her voice calm, yet foreboding.
I have a feeling we won't have the chance to use them.
The two Jedi stood in the shadow of the intimidating tower, its presence casting a dramatic and foreboding silhouette against the stark desert landscape. The weight of their mission pressed down on them, the air thick with anticipation and unspoken fears. They moved forward, their steps careful and deliberate, as the tower loomed even larger. Each step brought them closer to the heart of the once Sith influence and the dark secrets that lay hidden within the cursed skyscraper. The wind howled around them, carrying whispers of the past and the promise of a grim future. They could feel the weight of countless eyes upon them, watching, waiting. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to close in, and Barriss felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. "Master, do you think we are ready for this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Luminara looked at her apprentice, a mixture of determination and compassion in her gaze.
We are Jedi, Barriss. We face the darkness not because it is easy, but because it is our duty. Trust in the Force, and it will guide us.
Barriss nodded, drawing strength from her master's words. Together, they stepped into the shadow of the tower, ready to confront whatever horrors awaited them inside. Inside, the air was stale and cool, a stark contrast to the blazing heat outside. The dim light cast long shadows on the stone walls, creating an eerie ambience. Luminara led the way, her senses sharp. They moved through the deserted hallways, their footsteps echoing in the silence. The oppressive weight of the building seemed to press down on them, each corner holding the promise of a danger. As they advanced, she passed a poster that caught her sapphire eyes. It was a wanted poster.
Darth Malidi wanted dead.
Luminara read. She looked at the woman, who appeared to be Devaronian. The two black spots on her forehead were distinctive of all Devaronian females, but her yellow eyes were surrounded by dark tattoos that almost seemed to cover and hide her calmly, malevolent gaze.
This is interesting.
She panted as she found it herself, desperate for some form of relief from the heat. The Jedi Master walked along the wall of the building, looking for a door and praying it would open. She spotted a massive pane of ice blue glass and tried to speed her pace. She heard the electric motor click and the glass parted for her. A pleasure-filled groan escaped her as the cold air of the building embraced her. Lumina crept into a dark corner next to the door, cooling off as her eyes adjusted to the dark building. While the climate control for the building worked, the lights did not. The only light in the building came in through a massive window on the other side of the massive room. As her vision slowly adjusted, she could see a carpeted walkway with rows of stone platforms with dead plants and lamps atop of them. As she slowly walked into the reception area, Luminara took note of the non-working lamps. The bases were metal ornately molded into likeness of some sort of plant, complete with petals and thorns. The carpeted walkway opened into a circular seating area in the center of the room. Luxurious sofas were left to gather mold and dust. Expensive wooden tables were covered in a thick layer of dust.
What happened here?
She asked, looking around. Suddenly, a presence entered the back of her mind, setting her on edge. It was a dark and powerful presence, more powerful than any she had ever felt. Luminara looked up, trying to pinpoint the other person in the building. She looked over to the elevator, using the force to press the button. The door opened, and she stepped inside.
The lights must have been knocked out,
she thought to herself as she entered the elevator. As it climbed, she could sense that the dark presence in the building was searching for her as well. She tried to calm her nerves and ignore the damp clothes she was wearing. The elevator stopped, and the doors opened. She stepped onto a dark floor, unsure of what she was looking for, but could feel that this person was close. She entered a pitch-black hallway when a red light illuminated the other end of the corridor. Luminara deployed her lightsaber.
Ah, a Jedi!
A woman hissed from the other end of the hall with a heavy accent. The door behind Luminara slid closed, and she heard the heavy lock click shut, leaving her trapped in a dark hall lit only by the red and green glow of their lightsabers. The hum of the two weapons reverberated off the walls as Luminara readied herself for a coming attack. To her surprise, the Sith left the tight comfiness of the hall. With no choice, Luminara followed, a lightsaber ready. The Jedi left the hallway and entered a massive room, at least 2 stories tall, with tall stone platforms rising out of the floor scattered around. A floor-to-ceiling window took up the entire wall opposite to Luminara, with a portion of the floor dropped down in front of the window, forming a viewing area of the desert landscape. The seat stood between her and an open door across the room. Luminara finally got a good look at her opponent. The woman standing before her was the same woman from the wanted poster. Darth Malidi. Her red skin was adorned with swirling black tattoos running up her arms. She wore a black sleeveless robe under dark grey steel armor, and her long black hair was pulled into a tail under a metal headpiece. Her fiery orange eyes glinted from the shadow she stood in.
I was wondering when the Republic would turn its attention out here.
Malidi growled.
Killing you may take the bounty off my head.
Questions swirled in Luminara's head.
You know that won't solve your problems,
she said, knowing she was just saying random words. Sith Lords did not like sharing power. Luminara knew Malidi would more likely be killed after turning her body to whatever Sith was ruling this planet.
Maybe so, but I cannot let a Jedi live.
Malidi replied, readying herself to engage the Jedi. Luminara waited for Malidi's attack. She hated attacking first. Doing so left her wide open to a counterattack, especially using her preferred Form 3 fighting style, which favored defense instead of offense. Luminara preferred to counter her opponent, and Malidi seemed to be one of the same mindset as she stood across, glaring at the Miralian Jedi. The area surrounding Malidi seemed to grow darker just by her presence. She raised her hand, and Luminara braced herself. Suddenly, she was hit with a splitting headache as her focus on her enemy was shattered. Luminara rushed backwards as Malidi force jumped to the place she was just standing at. Just as quickly as the headache appeared, it was gone.
So weak.
Malidi laughed.
Your mind is defenseless.
The Sith Lord swung her lightsaber, and Lumina spun around Malidi and launched her own slashing counterattack. Malidi was too fast. She broke off her attack and blocked Luminara's attack. Their lightsabers clashed, showering the floor with sparks and filling the room with an electric crackling. A wicked and sadistic smile had overtaken Darth Malidi's face. While her eyes were orange, Luminara could swear they were pitch black. Luminara swung her lightsaber up, guiding Malidi's as the Jedi spun around, distancing herself from the Sith. It was no use. Malidi was rushing her, lightsaber trailing, ready to end Luminara's life. She raised her saber to block Malidi's. There was an immense electric crack and growl as spark erupted.
You're trapped. Weak Jedi.
Malidi taunted as Luminara was rocked by another headache. Malidi broke off the attack as Luminara staggered towards the window. Her mind flooded with images and voices shouting how evil the Jedi Order was.
Submit to me.
Malidi said from behind Luminara.
Become my apprentice.
Luminara reached under her robe for her pistol. She tried to aim at Malidi and fire, but Malidi stopped the bolt with the force. The assault on Luminara's mind stopped, and she launched an attack with her lightsaber. The Sith dodged to the side, and Luminara's lightsaber cut its way into the ground, leaving the deep gash glowing white hot. She looked up in the time to see Malidi's blood-red lightsaber rocketing towards her. Luminara collapsed to the ground and watched as the saber sailed over her. The battle raged on, both women left panting.
Surrender!
Luminara demanded. The only answer she got was a laugh. Luminara launched a striking attack. Malidi dodged and countered with an upward sweeping attack, which Luminara tried to avoid by twirling around, but she wasn't fast enough this time. Malidi's lightsaber cut off the edge of Luminara's headdress. The Jedi Master went for Malidi's head, but the Sith Force jumped and flipped over Luminara as the green lightsaber cut off a chunk of her hair. The two women were evenly matched. Luminara was better disciplined with the lightsaber, but Malidi was more agile. Malidi could manipulate Luminara's mind, but Luminara could predict Malidi's next move, and both women were reaching the limits of their stamina. Malidi simultaneously force-pushed Luminara and launched a force-jumping attack. The exhausted Jedi Master was barely able to block the attack. Malidi flashed a sadistic smile down at her helpless opponent. The lightsabers cracked and growled. Luminara gritted her teeth as sparks narrowly avoided her. She had to do something. Her strength was waning, and her lightsaber was inching towards her. She focused on Malidi and, with all the strength she could muster, force-pushed the Sith. Malidi went flying through the air, and Luminara was pushed into the floor. Her body ached as she struggled to stand, only managing to make it to her knees. Her vision was a blurred mess, and her very pale vision was non-existent. She could see Malidi's body sprawled on the floor. Luminara could feel Malidi probing her mind. Luminara ran through the process of rushing over and finishing off the Sith Lord. Slowly, as she were waking up from a deep sleep, Malidi began to move, trying to push herself up from the floor. Luminara had put too much into her force shove. Both women were left dazed, and Malidi managed to survive. This woman was more powerful than Luminara had initially thought. Malidi sat on all fours, panting, gripping her lightsaber. Luminara rested on her knees, sweat streaming down her face. She deployed her lightsaber, and Malidi tried to prepare for an attack. Suddenly, Malidi's gaze shifted from Luminara to the hall behind her. Luminara could sense a dozen soldiers on the other side of the door she entered through. Malidi broke off the engagement and dashed for the open door on the other side of the room. Luminara had no choice but to follow. She knew the soldiers were not friendly. Luminara pushed herself to her feet, her muscles screaming in protest. She took a deep breath, centering herself with the force, and sprinted after Malidi. The Sith was fast, her dark robes billowing behind her as she fled down the corridor. The sound of approaching soldiers grew louder, their boots echoing ominously against the stone walls. Luminara's heart pounded in her chest as she chased her elusive foe, her focus unwavering despite the fatigue gnawing at her body. Every step was a test of her endurance and resolve, but she pressed on, knowing the importance of stopping Malidi. As they reached the end of the hallway, Malidi burst through a door, revealing a vast chamber bathed in dim, flickering light. Ancient Sith artifacts lined the walls, casting eerie shadow across the room, their dark energy palpable. Luminara hesitated for a fraction of a second, taking in the scene, before charging in after her foe. The room felt oppressive, the weight of countless dark rituals and secrets pressing down on her shoulders. She knew she had to end this quickly before the malevolent influence of the artifacts could weaken her resolve. Malidi turned to face her, her orange eyes gleaming with malice and confidence.
You won't leave here alive, Jedi,
she snarled, raising her lightsaber with a menacing flourish. The words hung in the air, a chilling promise of the battle to come. Luminara felt a shiver run down her spine, but pushed the fear aside, focusing on the task at hand. The room's dim light seemed to grow darker as the two adversaries prepared for their final confrontation, each movement a calculated step into the deadly dance.
We'll see about that,
Luminara replied, her voice steady despite the exhaustion. She ignited her own lightsaber, the green blade humming to life with a reassuring glow. The contrast between the vibrant green of her saber and the crimson of Malidi's was stark, a visual representation of the light versus dark struggle playing out before them. The air cracked with tension, each warrior poised a strike, their eyes locked in a deadly dance. Luminara's mind raced, formulating strategies and anticipating Malidi's next move, each thought a step ahead in the lethal game. They clashed again, their sabers creating a dazzling display of light and sound, each strike sending reverberations through the chamber. Each strike was met with a counter, each move anticipated and blocked with skill and precision. Luminara could feel her strength waning, but she pressed on, determined not to let Malidi escape. The artifacts around them seemed to react to their battle, pulsing with dark energy that made the air feel heavy and oppressive. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to sap her energy, but she drew on the force to keep her going, each breath a testament to her determination. Suddenly, Malidi's eyes flickered to something behind Luminara. She risked a glance over her shoulder and saw Barriss standing in the doorway, her lightsaber drawn and ready. "Master, are you all right?" Barriss called out, her voice filled with concern and determination. The sight of her apprentice gave Luminara a renewed sense of hope, knowing she was not alone in this fight. The bond between them strengthened a shared resolve to defeat their common enemy, their connection a beacon of light in the oppressive darkness.
I'm fine, Barriss,
Luminara replied, keeping her focus on Malidi.
We need to end this now.
Her words carried the weight of their shared mission, the urgency of their situation. Malidi's face twisted into a sneer, her confidence still unshaken, despite the reinforcements. The Sith Lord's arrogance was palpable, her belief in her superiority could be shown in her every move. But Luminara knew better than to underestimate her, each second a crucial part of their survival. Malidi's face twisted into a sneer.
"Two Jedi? How delightful,"
she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm and disdain. She raised her hand and with a powerful force push sent a wave of energy crashing towards them. Luminara and Barriss were thrown back, slamming into the walls with bone-jarring force. The impact knocked the breath from Luminara's lungs, but she forced herself to stand, her resolve unbroken. She could feel the pain radiating through her body, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the battle at hand, her determination a shield against the physical agony. Groaning, Luminara struggled to her feet, her vision swimming with stars. She could see Barriss doing the same, her determination evident despite the pain etched to her face.
Stay together,
Luminara instructed, her voice firm and commanding.
We can defeat her if we work as one.
Barriss nodded, moving to stand beside her master, their bond as strong as ever. Together, they advanced on Malidi, their lightsabers held high and ready for battle. Their steps synchronized in a show of unity and strength. Malidi's confidence wavered for a moment as she realized she was outnumbered, but she quickly masked her uncertainty, her lips curling into a defiant snarl. The sneak bravado was a thin veneer, hiding the fear that lurked beneath. The room's temperature seemed to drop, the tension thick enough to cut with a lightsaber. Luminara could sense the fear in her opponent, and she knew they had a chance to turn the tide. Each move was calculated, and each strike aimed to exploit the growing cracks in Malidi's defense. The battle resumed, more intense than before. Luminara and Barriss moved in perfect harmony, their attacks synchronized and fluid. Malidi struggled to keep up, her defense weakening with each passing moment. Sparks flew as their blades clashed, the sound reverberating through the chamber like thunder. The room was filled with the hum and crackle of lightsabers, a symphony of destruction and determination. Each strike brought them closer to victory. Their unity a formidable force, their determination an unbreakable shield. Just as it seemed they might gain the upper hand, the door behind them burst open and a squad of heavily armed soldiers stormed in. Their armor bore the unmistakable insignia of the one Sith, a chilling reminder of the enemy they faced.
"Get them!"
One of the soldiers shouted, raising his blaster and firing. Luminara and Barriss were forced to split their focus, deflecting blaster bolts while trying to fend off Malidi's relentless assault. The room erupted into chaos, the sound of blaster fire and clashing lightsabers filling the air, a cacophony of battle and desperation. Luminara knew they wouldn't hold on much longer. They needed to find a way to turn the tide in their favor. The relentless onslaught from Malidi and the soldiers was pushing them to their limits.
Barriss, we need to create a diversion.
Luminara called out over the din, her mind racing with possibilities.
Focus on the soldiers. I'll handle Malidi.
Barriss nodded, her face set with determination, and charged towards the soldiers, her lightsaber a blur as she deflected their shots and struck down those who got too close. Luminara's green lightsaber crashed into Malidi's red lightsaber. The two grunted in frustration. Neither could gain the upper hand. Both women looked to the one Sith troopers flooding the room. Barriss was doing her best to hold them off.
We have to work together if we want to escape the troopers.
Malidi hissed through clenched teeth. Luminara broke away from the Sith and was forced to block blaster bolts. To her surprise, Darth Malidi was doing the same.
Fine!
She shouted at Malidi.
We'll work together for now.
They hurled their lightsabers into the crowd of Sith troopers. They whirled it through the air, cutting down soldiers in their path, and arched back to their owners. Luminara and Malidi rushed to Barry's side.
We have to get out of here,
Malidi barked. Master? Barry said, confused.
Change of plans. Malidi will help us for now.
Luminara replied.
Push forward.
Malidi ordered, and the trio advanced, cutting their way through the troopers. The one Sith soldiers began to fall back in a traffic retreat. Malidi and Luminara collapsed to their knees, gasping for air as they glared at each other drenched in sweat.
We need to leave,
Luminara said.
The city is more than likely storming with soldiers.
Malidi grunted, getting to her feet. Barriss watched the Sith Lord closely.
I will help you escape the troopers if you get me off the planet.
Malidi proposed.
Fine.
Luminara replied. She didn't have the luxury of time to think about it. The three rushed through the building to the main exit.
Prepare yourself, Barriss.
Luminara ordered as they neared the door. The trio left the building, lightsabers ready to block incoming blaster bolts. The troopers hesitated and Malidi took her opening. She force-pushed a group. Luminara and Barriss hurled their lightsabers into a formation. Blasters erupted as the group made their way to the outskirts of the city. Malidi was ruthless with her attacks, striking down every soldier in her path. The troopers seemed more interested in trying to take her out as opposed to the Jedi. Luminara struggled to keep up with Barriss and Malidi under the ruthless rays of the sun. Her palms were slick with sweat. The hot air burned her lungs as she gasped. Her mouth had gone dry long ago. "Keep moving!" Barriss called back to Luminara. Finally, they reached the outskirts of the town, the VCX 100, light freighted in sight.
"We're almost there!"
Luminara shouted, her voice filled with hope. But as they neared the ship, more soldiers appeared, blocking their path. "We have to break through," Barriss said, her voice filled with resolve. With a final surge of energy, they fought their way to the ship, their lightsabers cutting through the soldiers with precision and fury. The ramp lowered, and they scrambled inside, their bodies aching and exhausted.
"Get us out of here!"
Luminara shouted to the ship's AI, her voice filled with urgency. The engines roared to life, and the ship lifted off the ground, leaving the battlefield behind. As they ascended into the sky, Luminara couldn't help but feel a sense of relief mingled with lingering dread. Malidi had glanced around the ship. The one Sith still wanted her dead and now posed a threat to the Republic. The road ahead would be challenging, but they had survived this battle.
"We'll have to report back to the Republic,"
Luminara said, her eyes fixed on the stars.
"and we'll need to prepare for whatever comes next."
Barriss nodded, her expression resolved. "We will be ready, Master. We'll face whatever comes together." Luminara smiled, proud of her apprentice's courage and determination.
"Yes, we will."
She agreed, her voice filled with quiet strength. As they entered hyperspace, Luminara looked forward, ready to confront the darkness and protect the galaxy from the rising threat of the one Sith. The stars streaked past the viewpoint, a reminder of the vastness of the galaxy and the endless possibilities it held. The journey ahead will be challenging, but they were prepared to face it together. With courage, determination, and the guidance of the Force, they would stand against the encroaching darkness and safeguard the light. The future was uncertain, but their resolve was unwavering, their unity a beacon of hope in a galaxy shrouded into darkness. While the ship was already in mid-air, Malidi came closer to the window that showed a beautiful sight for eyes. Dark blue sky with thousands and thousands of stars that shined so bright you had to squint your eyes from time to time. She didn't care too much about the Jedi who, apparently, was the only known for her that kept their promise.
"Aren't you going to be in big trouble, Jedi?"
Malidi asked, slowly turning towards two women that didn't look too friendly. Luminara and Barriss looked at each other in silence, trying to find the best words. They didn't know if engaging with such a criminal was a good idea. Yes, they helped her, but only because they were also able to gain from this. Barriss was even thinking about calling some help that would capture the criminal, but her master was against it. They shared such a strong bond that even a small look on the other person could tell you a lot.
"That's none of your concern. You should better watch yourself."
Luminara responded after long seconds, which made Malidi chuckle with amusement.
"Suit yourself, Jedi. In the end, I'm not going to be the one who will die."
Barriss didn't know if that was a threat, but she quickly grabbed her sword, and only a soft hand of her master that was placed on her shoulder made her calm. Luminara knew that they would most likely fail if they tried to find Malidi again, at least for now. After taking a deep breath and glancing in silence at the criminal, who was smiling, clearly ready to fight, the two of them stepped away.
"Don't let her provoke you."
"Yes, Master."